Welcome on back, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules Footy Podcast. This is episode 34. This is our Round 15 preview for the 2024 AFL season. Welcome on in. Big week again in football. As always, we'll be running through maybe the latest news. I don't think there's anything too exciting this week, but we'll have a quick look at that. Round 15 preview, look at each and every one of the games, and then we'll finish off with my tips for the week. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. If you're listening to this on Spotify, don't forget to go over to the YouTube. There's been plenty of other content over there over the last few weeks. We've done mid-season reviews for every one of those teams, so go check them out. Plenty of content over on YouTube. Also, all of my social medias. We've got Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Check them all out. Plenty of stuff happening all over the place. So that's all Aussie rules at all of them. Always. Jump into the news. I don't think there's anything too overly exciting other than the AFL coming out and saying that the umpires were right last weekend. A lot of debate about that, but we don't really jump too much into that over here at All Aussie Rules. We focus on the football and the football only. Umpires, the AFL said it was right, so we just have to go with it. It's confusing, but that's the world we live in. Going team by team, game by game, I guess. Let me just get the first match of the round up. We lead off on Friday night. This will be Carlton versus Geelong at the MCG. Big game, big game. Carlton will go into this as favourites. They're sitting second on the ladder, cruising along. Geelong, they're sixth on the ladder. Sort of regaining a little bit of form, maybe, potentially. Just a big game for both teams. We'll have a quick look at the teams. They've just been announced. For me, it's Thursday evening. So right now, the teams have just come out. Carlton have Orazio Fantasia coming back into the team, and out goes Jack Carroll omitted. For Geelong, Zach Tui's back, Oliver Henry's back, and the biggest one is Paddy Dangerfield is back. So 3 big ins really for Geelong there. Out goes Shannon Neal omitted, and then Reece Stanley and Tanner Bruin both injured. So some big ins and outs, especially for Geelong. Big news there. So these two played each other in round 7. So what's that, like 8 weeks ago? And Geelong got the win, even though Carlton probably had the better of it and big chunks of the game. They wasted their chances, especially early in that first quarter to first half. They certainly should have been on level peggings, I think. I think they managed to get back inside in the lead late in the last quarter, but Geelong kind of just wrestled it back and ended up winning, not comfortably, but by a couple goals. Carlton dominated the inside 50 count that day. I think they also might have won the clearances from memory. Geelong's efficiency inside 50 was the crucial bit. It was one of their better performances inside 50 that they've had this year. Over the last 5 matchups between these two teams, Geelong lead 3-2. Surprisingly, the last 2 have been a little bit more open and high scoring, but before that, the 3 matches were really low scoring, which is a little bit surprising because Carlton, especially, are an offensive team. Looking at the current form for both teams, it's pretty much the exact opposite if we think about it. Carlton are 4-1 over the last 5, whereas Geelong are 1-4. Obviously, difference in opponents, but Carlton are certainly coming up back into their best after they had a little bit of a shaky period around about rounds 5 to 10-ish, somewhere in that area. But they've certainly turned that around. Geelong's still trying to get back out of their flunk. Obviously, they won their first 7, and it's been quite tough for them since that period. If you look at their numbers, both offensively and defensively, scoring-wise, both teams are very, very similar. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out here. Obviously, both teams Carlton are ranked third and Geelong fourth for scoring, and then defensively Carlton are 15th and Geelong 13th. So they're very similar in that regard, but Carlton overall are the much better team at forward efficiency. Outside of the one time these two teams played each other where Carlton really struggled, well, they weren't bad, to be honest. They were still pretty good at forward efficiency that day, but Geelong were just really, really good. They play very much different game styles, though, to get their scoring to similar spots. Carlton win the ball at the coalface, get the hard ball, ground ball gets, try to dominate clearances. They don't always succeed at that part, obviously. But yeah, they try and win the ball more as their main source of getting the ball and moving it forward. Whereas Geelong aren't great at clearance game, which isn't surprising. Dangerfield coming back might help that if he goes into the midfield, but they might also keep him out of the midfield for his first week back and get him some game time under his legs. But they focus more on the intercept turnover game. They are very good at it. They are the number one ranked team in that regard, at creating intercepts compared to their turnovers. So that's how Geelong kind of want to play their games of footy and dominate in that regard and turn that into their scoring opportunities. Carlton last time, as we mentioned, just couldn't convert their opportunities. They had plenty of ground territory battle, I guess, but they just didn't convert it into scoring opportunities, and then once they did convert it into scoring opportunities, they missed too many of them. So they'll be looking to tidy that up in this meeting between the two teams. Game number 2 of the weekend. This will be Saturday afternoon. It says 1:45. That is Australian Eastern Time. It'll be 1:15 in Adelaide time. This will be Port Adelaide versus Brisbane at the Adelaide Oval. Port Adelaide will be going into this slight favourites. It's very tight in the market at the moment. Port are sitting 7th on the ladder. Brisbane are 13th. Certainly different ways of getting to this point this year. We'll have a look at the ins and outs for both teams. For Port Adelaide, they have Logan Evans coming in for his debut. Jordan Sweet comes in. Finn Layson comes back in after being dropped, I believe, last week. Willie Rioli also comes in. So some big names there. Out goes Ivan Soldo omitted. Quinton Narkle omitted. Dylan Williams and Francis Evans also both omitted. For Brisbane, in comes Shadai Brain, and out goes Noah Answorth, who is injured. And we have a milestone game in this one. Harris Andrews will be playing his 200th game of AFL footy, so good luck to him. These two teams obviously met last year in the prelim final. Both teams looking a fair way away from a prelim final at the moment. Certainly Brisbane have a lot of work to do. They're sitting 13th on the ladder, so they've got a lot of ground to catch up. Port Adelaide, top 4 is still possible. Obviously last week was not a great result for them, but it's still feasible, but they need to win these sort of games. I really feel like, just like the Friday night game, this is a really big game for both teams. The winner of it really pushes their case for finals, whereas the loser, maybe, if Brisbane lose this, you say, makes it tougher. And if Port Adelaide lose this, you go, well, are they really a top 8 team? But we'll see. So yeah, as I said, they played in the prelim last year. Brisbane won that one by a comfortable 48 points. Never really looked in doubt of winning that one. The last 2 years, they've only had one meeting. They meet in round 1. Both of those years. Last year was at Adelaide Oval. The Power won that one by 54 points after trailing at halftime, so a really good second half from them in 2023. And in 2022, they played at the Gabba. Brisbane won that one by 11 points. So home team has been winning the matchup between these two teams over the last couple of years. We'll see what that means on the weekend, but that suggests that Port Adelaide will be in with a show. Port Adelaide go into this match having lost their last two matches. Obviously, they had the bye in the middle of those two, but certainly not the best form for them going in. Brisbane's form, however, has been a lot better over the last 4 or 5 weeks. They've won 3 of their last 4, and that only loss was against Hawthorn, which are one of the form teams of the competition. That was the week before their bye, so they've come back and looked good since their bye. They were really good last week. So we'll see what happens with that. Port Adelaide, they lead the league in forward efficiency, number 1 ranked. That plus the fact that they're one of the better teams at territory battle and inside 50 count, plus 5.2 inside 50s per game compared to their opponents, means they create plenty of opportunities. Probably almost the most opportunities at goal in the competition, to be honest. However, their accuracy in front of goal is quite bad. Ranked 17th in the league, kicking under 50%. That's probably their major flaw, at least in the forward half of the ground, is doing that. It's their poor kicking in front of goal has definitely cost them in multiple matches this year. Brisbane, they struggle once they're inside 50. They get the ball forward very well, but they don't convert them into shots. They're even better at getting the ball inside 50 than Port Adelaide, but they create less shots. They go inside 50 7.8 times more than their opposition. So it'll be very interesting to see which one of these two teams dominates the territory battle. It will probably turn out that neither dominate it, and it's just going to be a bit of an arm wrestle in that regard. Both teams do have similar overall clearance numbers. However, Port are the better team at centre clearances, whereas Brisbane are better at the stoppage clearances. So I would expect that's probably how this game will likely go, but I guess we'll wait and see. Port don't have... No, they do have high tackle numbers, sorry. I don't know what I was reading then. They will likely dominate this category on the weekend. Brisbane are not a high tackling team. This tackle pressure that they do bring and the pressure acts and whatnot doesn't really turn them into turnovers though, which is a little surprising because most of the teams that really bring the tackle pressure tend to be really good at the turnover game. But however, Brisbane are probably the better of these two teams in that regard. Looks like it's going to be a close game for all intents and purposes, really. It could be an absolute arm wrestle. Massive game for both teams. Neither will be wanting to lose this one. Game number 3 of the weekend is up next Saturday. 4:35 game. GWS Sydney, the Battle of the Bridge. Obviously, Sydney will be going into this favourites. They've only lost one game this year. They're absolutely cruising. GWS are back into 5th on the ladder after a good win last week against Port Adelaide. It was not the prettiest of wins, but they got the job done, and that's all that matters in the end. Looking at the ins and outs for this game, Lockie Ash and James Peatling are in for GWS, as is Max Gruiski. He will be making his debut. Out goes Sam Taylor, who's injured. Big injury there for them. Nick Haynes injured as well. And Aaron Cadman's been interestingly omitted. So yes, that's the 3 changes for the GWS Giants. For Sydney, Caden Cleary comes in for his debut. So they're giving an extra player a game. They haven't used many players this year, so good luck to Caden Cleary making his debut. Out goes Matt Roberts, who has been omitted. These two teams obviously have already met this year. They met in round 8. Sydney won it reasonably comfortably, to be honest. GWS started well, led in the first quarter, but Sydney took it over from then on and kind of won, not super comfortably, but never really in doubt from that point. last year when at this ground at NG Stadium, the Swans won it by 11 points, mainly due to their accurate kicking, to be honest. GWS had 14 extra inside 50s for the match and 3 extra shots and lost by 11 points, sorry. So, yeah, we'll see how that plays out. The Swans have won 4 of the last 5 against the Giants, with the only one other result. The Giants' one win was a 1-point win at the SCG in round 7 last year. The Giants' form, to be honest, is a little bit hit or miss. There's no two ways about it. They were okay last week. They've only won 2 of their last 5. There's been a couple disappointing losses. Obviously, down in Tassie against Hawthorn, they weren't great. They got beaten that day. But last week, they got a win, so they're back on the winners list. And they'll be hoping that they can somehow turn that into 2 wins in a row here. The Swans obviously flying. They haven't lost since round 3, I think it was, against Richmond. Things are just absolutely cruising for them. No questions about that. Looking at some of the stats for this match, the Swans have lost 5 of their last 6 first quarters, so a little bit slow out of the box, which, isn't overly concerning due to the fact that they're still winning every game and winning games comfortably. A lot of this has to do with their ability to score quickly and just take games out of the opposition's hands. But at some point, if you keep losing the first quarters, it's going to be, you'd have to think it's going to be a concern. It's not what you want to be doing in certainly finals time, losing that first quarter. So they'll probably just want to be looking at trying to find a way to switch on a little bit earlier, maybe. Anyway, they're winning games. That's all they can do. Sydney are currently the number 1 ranked offense and defensive team in terms of scoring and also most categories. Their season is about as dominant as you really can see. They're 3 games clear on top of the ladder plus percentage. They're absolutely cruising. Potentially could be 4 games up on top of the ladder if they win this one and Carlton go down. Or 3.5 games, because Essendon will probably win. Absolutely cruising. Both teams, offensively and defensively, are very efficient. They get lots of shots from their inside 50s, and they also don't concede that many shots from their defensive 50s. But the main difference between the two teams probably is the ability for Sydney to dominate the territory battle. They get it inside 50 bulk times in a row. They put the pressure on, and it's mainly through their midfield. GWS have a good midfield, but the way the Sydney midfield has operated this year is quite incredible. Between Goulden running on the wing, even getting inside a couple times here and there, Isaac Heaney's ability, Chad Warner's ability in the midfield, all of them get big numbers plus kick lots of goals. Chuck in the fact that you've got Rowbottom, who's an absolute defensive weapon. He dominates the tackle pressure in there. But he showed last week he can also get a lot of centre clearances. I think he got 6 or 8 himself. So he was really good in that regard. So Sydney are really good at dominating that territory battle. They're 3rd at inside 50 differential in the league this year, whereas the Giants are ranked 13th. So a big difference between these two teams there. A stat from last week that's potentially a little scary for other teams is the fact that Sydney absolutely dominated the centre clearance game. It's not an area that they're really that good at. They're ranked 13th in the league at centre clearances, and yet last week they set a season high for any team for centre clearance differential. So a little bit of a concern for other teams if Sydney start dominating the centre clearances as well. But we'll see what happens with that going forward. Obviously, neither team here are really great at centre clearances, whereas Sydney are very good at stoppage clearances. So you'd expect that to be an area that Sydney control as well this week. Both teams are pretty good at tackling pressure, defensive pressure, all that sort of stuff. So I think it's likely we'll see a pretty high-paced, high-pressure game. I don't foresee there being a heap amount of uncontested football in this game. I reckon it will be on for cats and dogs from the start. Both teams will be trying to make sure that the other team doesn't get away from them, and I think that plays more into Sydney's favour than GWS's, but I guess we'll wait and see in that regard. Game number 4 is the Saturday night footy game. Melbourne versus North Melbourne. I don't know what to say about this game. It's going to be an interesting one. Melbourne will be obviously starting strong favourites. They are sitting 11th on the ladder, have fallen a fair bit. It was only a few weeks back that they were sitting comfortably in the top 4, but they're coming off the bye this week. North Melbourne, they're sitting 18th on the ladder still, but maybe their form's improving. We'll have a quick look at the ins and outs for this match. So first off, Melbourne, they have Adam Tomlinson, Colton Thorpe, Kyan Brown coming in. Out goes Petrarca, who's obviously injured, and I don't think it's likely that we'll be seeing him again this year. Out also is Jack Billings and Bailey Laurie omitted. Kyan Brown is playing his debut game, so good luck to him. Over on the North Melbourne side of things, in comes Dylan Stevens and Jai Simpkin, who was a late out last week. And out goes Jaden Stevenson omitted and Callan Dawson suspended. And side note is Paul Curtis will be playing his 50th AFL game. So these two teams met last in round 21 last year. The Demons won it by 32 points. Wasn't the most dominant game of all time, but they got the job done. I think that was down in Hobart from memory at Blundstone Arena. The time before that they met was round 7 last year. This one was at the MCG, and the Demons won that by 90 points in dominant fashion. Kangaroos haven't beaten the Demons since round 23 2019, so we're approaching 5 years roughly since they've beaten them. Not the best stat, but you never know. Demons form is probably as bad as it's been for 4 or 5 years, to be honest. They're really struggling. They've only won one of their last 5 games, and that one was against the Saints, who certainly aren't setting the world on fire this year. Coming out of the bye, they'll be hoping that allowed them a little bit of time just to refresh and regroup, and hit the second half of the year running, because they certainly limped their way towards that bye. The Kangaroos' last 2 weeks, however, on the opposite side of things, have been their best 2 games of this year. I don't think there's any doubt about that. They beat the Eagles over in the West 2 weeks ago in, I won't say convincing fashion, but they got the job done, and that was a good performance. And then last week against Collingwood, they took them right down to the wire. They led by 9 goals at one point. Their first half was obviously really, really good. Ran out of legs a little bit in the second half, but certainly showed a bit. I think the interesting thing for North Melbourne going forward will be whether they can bring that pressure week after week. For the first 3 quarters against West Coast, that pressure was huge. It was really good, and they got result for it. They got the win. Against Collingwood, they probably didn't hold that pressure for as long. It was just as good. Their first half pressure was really, really high. But after halftime, they kind of lacked it a little bit, which you can understand. They're a young team trying to get that fitness, and that full 4-quarter pressure game is not an easy task for any team. So as long as they can keep bringing that for periods of game, I think it's a positive sign that hopefully they can take into the second half of this year and then develop it even more going forward. And maybe there is light at the end of the tunnel for the Kangaroos after all. Looking at some of the stats of this match, Melbourne really struggling offensively this season. They're just struggling to get a score on the board, averaging just 77 points a game throughout the year. Their last 2 weeks, they've scored 51 and 49, so really not great in either of those. It's really quite low scoring. So I think that's the main issue is for Melbourne right now is their inability to put a score on the board, a winning score on the board, that is. North, they're the most accurate team in the competition this year by quite a distance, really. We saw it again last week. They're very accurate in front of goal, and that's keeping their numbers respectable, I guess. Their season could be going a lot worse if they weren't kicking so straight. I think what will be the main thing in this game to watch will be to see if the Kangaroos can get enough score on the board to win this. Because Melbourne's defense is their one strong suit. Kangaroos' offense isn't great, but when it gets shots at goal, it usually converts them. But their ability to create chances isn't great, and Melbourne's ability to stop chances is really, really good. So I think North will probably struggle to find a way to kick a winning score against Melbourne, but we'll see what happens there, because neither team is great at the territory battle, but I just feel like that Melbourne defence is going to be strong enough to at least stop the goals. It could completely turn into a turnover match. Teams going end to end, completing turnover after turnover until someone scores, and that will definitely benefit Melbourne, in my eyes at least. But hopefully the Kangaroos bring the pressure that they have for the first half last week and the first 3 quarters against West Coast. If they can do it for the full 4 quarters, they're a potential chance to win, but it's certainly not going to be easy for them. We move on to Sunday football. This one will be at Marvel Stadium. We've got the Bombers hosting the Eagles. Essendon will go in, obviously, heavy favourites, sitting 4th on the ladder. By the end of the weekend, they could be 2nd if Carlton lose on Friday night and the Bombers get the win in this one. West Coast sitting 16th on the ladder with 3 wins. We'll have a look at the teams. Obviously, this is extended benches at the moment for this game and the final game, as they are the Sunday games. But at the moment, for Essendon, Mason Redmond, Xavier Dersma, Sam Draper, and Nate Caddy coming in. Out goes Elijah Sasa, and a milestone game for Jade Gresham, game number 150. For the West Coast Eagles, in comes Jaden Hunt, Oscar Allen, Tyler Brockman, and Josh Rotham. Out goes Dom Sheed, who is injured. These two teams have obviously already met this year. They met in round 8 over in the West. The Bombers won a tight match by 6 points. Neither team was great in it, but it went to the wire. Bombers got over the line in the end and was a big win. They met twice last year. The second time was at Marvel, where this game is, and the Bombers only won that one by a point. I think that was like round 21 though. The Bombers were struggling at this point of the year, but compared to this year at least. The Dons also won their earlier meeting when they played over in the West by 50 points. The match before that, the Eagles won in late 2022. Both teams coming off the bye, so we'll see how that affects both teams. No advantage, obviously, for either team there. The Dons have lost their last 2 matches. Obviously, their form before that was very, very good, and neither of those losses were bad. One against Carlton and one against Gold Coast up on the Gold Coast. Meanwhile, the Eagles have lost their last 3 games, and those 3 matches have been against the teams sitting 14th, 15th, and 18th on the ladder. So 3 of the worst 4 teams outside of themselves they've lost to over their last 3 matches. So not great signs there for the Eagles on current form, to be honest. Essendon tend to dominate the territory battle, whereas West Coast really struggle in that area. So I think we'll see Essendon getting a lot of inside 50s here. Probably the ball will sit in the Essendon forward half for long periods of this game, which you'd think would result in a high-scoring Essendon, which it may well do. But the issue Essendon have kind of battled all year is their ability to turn that territory into shots at goal. So that's going to be the thing that they probably have to overcome here. However, the Eagles' defense is also not great at stopping opportunities from defensive 50. So I think there's a fair chance that this might be an opportunity for Essendon to really get some confidence in their ability to convert that they might be able to take into future weeks potentially, because if they can do it this week, it might give them the confidence. Whereas if they fail to convert again this week, it might just suggest that their forward line isn't quite going well enough. But we'll see how that plays out. I just don't see a world where Essendon don't dominate this game. They should dominate clearances. They should dominate the territory. They should dominate the inside 50s. They're better at the turnover game than the Eagles. I just don't know where West Coast are going to create enough chances at Marvel against the Bombers here. Final game of the round, Sunday Arvo game. This will be over in the West. Fremantle hosting a Gold Coast. Fremantle obviously will be strong favourites in this. They're sitting 8th on the ladder. Gold Coast sitting 10th on the ladder, so not too far behind them. Looking at extended benches for these ones. Fremantle, they have coming in Heath Chapman, Hugh Davies, Tom Emmett, Neil Erasmus and Corey Wagner. Outgoing Josh Draper omitted and Michael Walters injured. Hugh Davies, if he gets a game, will be playing his debut. Meanwhile, Josh Tracy is playing his 50th AFL game. He's had a very good first 50 games, let me tell you. He has potential to be a very good player. For the Gold Coast, they've already done a lot of changes, so it'll be interesting to see what team they go with on the weekend. But in they have Will Powell, Jake Rogers, Sam Day, Jared Witts, Brandon Ellis, Lloyd Johnston, Alex Davies and Hugo Ao. I'm sorry, I've probably mispronounced that one, but yes. And out goes Brandon Fiorini, Nick Holman, Jed Walter and Ned Moyle, all omitted and banking injured. So a lot of tools going out and a lot of tools coming in for the Gold Coast Suns this week. Last time they met was round 5 last year. The Dockers won it by 10 points over at the Optus Stadium. In 2022, the Suns won that one by 36 points on the Gold Coast. Fremantle's form is a little up and down, to be honest. Sometimes they look really good, like the week before the bye, they dominated Melbourne. They followed that up with, granted, a game in Melbourne against the Bulldogs, where they just got absolutely dominated. So it'll be interesting to see where they're at this week, I guess. Gold Coast continue to be unbeaten in home games, but yet also to win a game away from home. So that's continuing to be a concern for the Gold Coast Suns. I don't know. If you want to know my real thoughts on Gold Coast, check out my mid-season review video on the YouTube channel, because I go in depth on a lot of the stats. It's the number differential between their home and away games is quite staggering, and I doubt it's something we've ever seen in AFL football, to be honest. It's crazy. The key stats difference that shouldn't be different, but somehow they just don't do it. Anyway, we'll see, I guess, on the weekend whether they can at least compete with Fremantle over in the West. Fremantle, the number 2 defence in the AFL so far this season. They really got found out last week, though, against the Doggies. They conceded 147, I think it was. So not a good sign, that. However, the game before, they showed that they have ability offensively, which they hadn't really shown too much when they scored 140 against Melbourne. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of Fremantle Docker team we get on the weekend. They obviously are the best clearance team in the AFL by a long way, the Fremantle Dockers. They only just beat the Bulldogs at that on the weekend, but they typically dominate that area of the game. Can they convert that into good inside 50 attacks? We'll see, because once they get it inside 50, they are actually very good at converting it into shots on goal. Their major issue, I guess, is they get clearances but don't convert it into inside 50s too often, or often enough, at least to cause issues for the other teams all the time. Yeah, so that's all 6 games coming up this weekend. We'll now have a look at my tips for the weekend. Here they come. So, game 1 of the weekend, we have Carlton-Geelong. I've gone Carlton by 7 points. I'm not convinced on Geelong. Obviously, their form at the start of the year was really good. They haven't been showing that of late. Carlton's form recent weeks has been really good. Their win against Port Adelaide was great. And then they were also good against the Bombers right before their bye. So I think on form, Carlton are probably the better team. Port Adelaide versus Brisbane. I'm going Brisbane by 10 here. I think Brisbane's season could be going a lot better. Obviously, they've still got a bulk of their almost premiership team from last year, where obviously they just went down in the grand final. Yes, they do have quite a few injuries, but I still think, and their numbers look great this year as well. I think they're like do they have third highest percentage in the AFL right now or something ridiculous? I think third behind Bulldogs and Sydney. So clearly they still are good enough. They just haven't been able to convert that into wins enough. I think if they win this one, they're right back in the hunt for the 8. GWS versus Sydney, it's hard to go past Sydney. They just don't lose at the moment. They probably will lose a game coming up at some point. I don't think this is it, but we'll see. Melbourne versus North Melbourne, I'm going for the Demons. Even though North have been strong the last 2 weeks, I think Melbourne come out of the bye with a little bit of renewed energy, and probably, hopefully for their sake, renewed energy, and they will win this one. Bombers should take care of the Eagles at Marvel, and the final game, Fremantle, I can't see them losing to Gold Coast over in the West. So that's a wrap up of everything round 15 coming up this weekend. As always, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know who you think's going to win these games this weekend down in the comments below. I appreciate you for tuning in. Don't forget, also check out over on YouTube all the mid-season review videos. There's 18 of them, one for every team. So go check them out. Thanks again, and I'll catch us on the next one.